My name is Braxton Turner, and I will be presenting the show Lovecraft Country. You all have no idea on how excited I am to share this complex show with all of you. But as you may know, I have been talking about this show for the past several months. But finally, we are here. And again, this is very exciting for me. Throughout this presentation, you all still may have questions, but the interesting thing and the good thing about this is that no matter how many times you watch the show, you may still have questions. But that is the beauty within the show. Anyway, let us get started. Early on in the semester, we have covered three important terms as it pertains to the Marxist criticism in Chapter 2. Those three things are being postmodernism, pre-modernism, and modernism. Based on what we have learned throughout the semester, Lovecraft Country is a modernist show that is serious, direct, and objective. And it also believes in its past experiences. But it also deals with the inner workings of consciousness, which was the common topic of discussion as far as the modernism aspect goes. As we shift, we will be talking about the synopsis of Lovecraft Country. Now, it was developed by the amazing showrunner and creator, Misha Green. But Lovecraft Country follows a young African-American man by the name of Atticus Freeman, who is played by Jonathan Majors. But he is a Korean war vet, but he travels across the United States in the 1950s to try to find his estranged father, Montrose Freeman, who was played by Michael K. Williams, may he rest in peace. But Tick doesn't travel alone. He joins up with his friend Letitia, who was played by Journey Smollett, and his uncle George, who was played by Courtney B. Vance. However, as they travel across the United States in the 50s, they find themselves to be in a great deal of danger and mishaps along the way. I have chosen three main concepts that are ingrained within the show that I found to be the most exciting to tackle. The first one being conflict theory, alienation, and gratification. We will now be transitioning into my first conflict, and that is titled Atticus's Ongoing Conflict. So throughout the entire show, Atticus Freeman has had a great deal of conflicts that he could not overcome, but those stemmed since he was a child. Atticus blames his father for being cold, overbearing, and distant. Now this was a result for creating the constant cycle of tension and bickering between him and his father. However, Montrose Freeman lacks the ability to convey to Atticus on how much he cares about him and for him. Atticus also worries that his father has this ongoing trauma, while Montrose Freeman worries that his son may be in a great deal of danger. Now the second conflict within Atticus, his connection with Christina Braithwaite. So while Christina Braithwaite is a white woman, Atticus is a black man, but Atticus, he holds and inherits the Braithwaite white bloodline. So that's a conflict right there between them, because back in those times, white people already really hated black people. So for Atticus to inherit some white blood, that made Christina really have hatred for Atticus. So that's a conflict that was going on throughout the entire show. They were clashing back on and back forth. And also, Atticus had an intimacy and love interest with a Jihad through the Korean War. Later on in the presentation, I will explain more about that. We will now be transitioning into my second conflict titled Jihad's Sexual Conflict. Now, Jihad was a kumiho. That is a creature that appears in the folk tales and legends of Korea. However, it can also transform itself into a beautiful woman, often set out to seduce boys, and that is a Korean term for a succubus. However, a kumiho is also a nine-tailed fox spirit. But once Jihad would be aroused during sex, the nine tails would come out of her body and attach themselves to her sexual partner, and then that will take the lives of the man. However, Jihad wasn't always born a kumiho. Her stepfather abused her as a child, and he also raped and molested her. Now, the mother summoned the kumiho spirit to protect herself and take revenge on her stepfather. Now, that is also dealing with the mother's super ego, because that deals with the critical observation and looking at the whole spectrum of things. That individual may sense guilt over the wrongdoing, which is the disapproval of wishes on the basis of the morality. Now, being a kumiho, this also had conflict with Atticus due to the simple fact of she not being able to control herself during sex. So she almost killed Atticus, but Atticus escaped and said he didn't want to see her ever again. I'm going to show you a clip that explains what I'm talking about. We will now be be diving into my second concept, alienation. And it is titled Christina's Reasoning for Alienating Herself. So let's get started. Number one, she was excluded from participating in her father's cult by being a woman. Oppression was also a huge factor, and she also was marginalized. And what does marginalization mean? The treatment of a person viewed as being insignificant. And Christina felt insignificant, which is why she separated herself from her family and wanted to do magic on her own. And she also did that by turning herself into her brother, who was a white man, who pretty much in those times, white men had the power, or men in general had the power over the female. So she wanted to transform herself into being her brother. And I'm about to show you a clip of that right now.
The day, and I want to know why. William, what's wrong?
I will now be talking about the second character who I thought dealt with alienation. And it is titled Montrose Freeman's Necessary Alienation. So for starters, Montrose Freeman alienated himself because he was a homosexual, and he kept it a secret from the family for a long time. He also wasn't Atticus's father either. Uncle George was Atticus's father, but he had to keep the lie going. He also became an alcoholic, and he also would beat Atticus as a child. And that is a generational curse because Montrose Freeman's father beat him as a kid. He actually took him outside to show everybody to beat him as a kid. Why did he do that? Because again, being a homosexual, especially in the 1950s, wasn't really okay. It's not okay now, but it's more acceptable now than it was back in the 1950s, especially as a black man. So he beat Montrose Freeman because he was trying on his mother's shoes and mother's outfits and stuff like that. And Montrose Freeman beat Atticus because he was dealing with that with his own trauma early on in his age. So that's a generational curse part. His father beating him beating Atticus, but two different scenarios, but the same thing. So, and he also endured a lot of pain as a black man, which all of those elements that I talked about as well. We will now be transitioning into my last and final concept, which is called gratification, but it is titled Hippolyta's Purposeful Gratification. So let us get started. So Hippolyta Freeman went throughout life as a regular human being, not knowing her purpose and understanding of who she was. And she was being a wife, a mother, and a friend, tackling all of that while still not knowing her purpose. It wasn't until later on in the show that she found her purpose within life. She was in altered universes, which made her out to be an Amazonian warrior. She was mentored by Josephine Baker to become a singer, and she was able to go into space to finally to see her deceased husband, Uncle George, one last time. I found gratification within Hippolyta Freeman because I can relate to it, because from the time I was in elementary to the time I was in high school, I did not find purpose in my life. I was very unhappy, and I was just going through the motions as well. It wasn't until I went to college that I found my true purpose and my true calling, and that is called the iceberg service. The iceberg service. What is that? Well, that is the bottom of the iceberg, which lies beneath the surface, because that is the greater purpose that you won't be able to see that is still there, which is dealing with the unconscious mind. Well, everyone, this concludes my portion of the presentation. I hope you all thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you all learned some new things about a show that you may not have seen, and hopefully you will be able to go watch this on your own and create your own analysis and stuff like that as well. So thank you all again. I hope you enjoyed it, and here is my application chart. Thank you all.